Hello everyone, thanks for tuning in to my talk today. My name is Kayla Kipps and I am the Collection Development Librarian at the College of Charleston in Charleston, South Carolina. I've been in this position for a little over 4 years now, and I am going to be talking with you all today about building a framework from scratch using cloud-based technology tools to streamline collection assessment. When I began this position, it was understood that assessment would be a large portion of my job description. And this had been the case in the past, but my position had experienced some turnover before I came on board. And, a lot of assessment work remained kind of non-updated, or requests were left to be dealt with as they came in, which is just not a good system to get in the habit of. But today I'm just going to be discussing my experiences building templates for assessment and the different cloud-based tools that I use to get my assessment work done. A little background on my institution. The College of Charleston is a public university located in the heart of downtown Charleston, South Carolina. So it is a very urban campus. It's historically been a very liberal arts-focused public institution, but as of late, it has nearly 70 undergraduate programs across all disciplines and is continuously growing in STEM fields. In the past few years, engineering programs have been added to the undergraduate curriculum, kind of in accordance with industry growth in those areas in the greater metro area. The college also has aspirations of upgrading from its M1 Carnegie class to becoming a DPU status school with the introduction of doctoral programs to the university's offerings in very recent semesters. We've just started a doctoral program in mathematics, and we're in the process of starting doctoral programs within other schools at the college, like the School of Education and the School of Business. So, assessment work has been very important in this context because our institution has woven the library into the program proposal process. And this was not always the case, but it is very important for the library to be involved in these conversations surrounding new programs being introduced to an institution, as resources are going to be needed to support the instruction and research of those areas, of course, especially if it's something that's brand new to an institution, such as engineering was for us. Here's a bit of an overview of our library collections and branches at the College of Charleston campus. Largely, the campus community is served by our main branch, Addlestone Library, which also houses our special collections, and additionally the archives of the South Carolina Historical Society. Under our umbrella, we also have the Avery Research Center, the Marine Resources Library, and the Low Country Digital Library, which provides our electronic presence. So we have a plethora of information resources available, and assessment work helps get folks informed about these resources. Does collection assessment play into all of this? There are many reasons folks inside and outside the library may need further information on collections, and at a more granular level than what maybe is available on the library website or from a simple search in the catalog or from browsing subject guides, which is what assessment documents can kind of synthesize for them. In my experience, I've had to pull different types of library collection data for assessment purposes for all of the reasons provided on this bulleted list. And each one can require different types of collections data, which is why building templates can be very helpful. But I want to kind of go over the different types of data that some of these reports may be asking of you. Accreditation reports are incredibly important to an institution and even to an individual program across campus. We recently pulled data for our music department's accreditation review with the governing body, the National Association of Schools of Music. Because we had started tracking how we were collecting certain types of data for these reporting purposes, collecting updated information for this report was a much easier task than it had been in the past. And I believe cases like that showcase how important it is to take the time to build these templates and to document how things are collected. because your future self or your future colleagues will greatly appreciate that work, even if it does feel like it's a daunting task now. Accreditation reports can ask for pretty particular data, especially financial data. So this is a case where it is really important to document how you came to certain facts and figures each year so that you're able to explain them and so that you're able to recreate them, and so you can also pull that information in the future in a consistent way as to not cause anomalies. Institutional data requests come in several times a year for us for information on library collections that can be in support of new programs on campus or for other reasons. My institution is one that is certainly growing a lot in terms of offering new curriculum and programs to campus, so it has been a very hefty task for me to learn our collections in that way, as I'm still fairly new to the position, especially as I started authoring these reports a few years ago. And that's mostly why I'm here sharing my experience in creating these templates and creating these reports. But the more assessment work you do like this, the more familiar you become with your collections, and that's really valuable knowledge to have as a librarian in your institution. I won't spend a lot of time on survey reports today, but creating guidelines and templates for survey data can also be very beneficial because these are reports that are pulled yearly, and it is important to always collect data in the same ways year to year as to not cause too many anomalies in the data. And this is really important for these national surveys because they are going to entities outside of your institution. They can also be valuable for informative purposes. The root of collection assessment is for a library and its members to be intimately familiar with its collections across subject areas and being able to point folks to specific resources in their respective subject areas usefully. I also like using informative assessment documents to share more of the data that is usually only kept and looked at internally in a library, maybe only even in technical services, with our campus community, such as usage data. I've also taken the time to add data visualization to these reports to visually showcase this data to campus members. The data itself can be very library forward and may not mean a lot to others on campus, but data visualization can help more quickly illustrate those what seemingly simple data points shared within the reports. A bit of background on my position is that my particular position experienced a few periods of turnover before I came on board. And I have now been in this position for a little over 4 years. This stability in the position has enabled me to create more streamlined processes for data requests that come to my department for different reasons. And this has made receiving institutional requests easier, and it has given me the opportunity to update my subject area assessment documents, those informative assessment documents I've been talking about, many of which have not been updated since the 2000s. And have been completed by many different people without any real guidelines as to how to format them or what data to include overall. So today I'm going to focus on my informative assessment documents. So let's get into the different things that you need to think about when you are beginning to create your framework. The first step when creating your assessment templates will be to identify what types of data sources you'll need to confer to actually fill out the document. For example, in assessment documents for informative purposes, you'll need information on your monographic holdings by subject area, available journal titles, available databases in that area, different ranking tools for determining the scholarly value of journals and books held locally, like Schemago or Choice. Information you'd like to gather from peer institutions for benchmarking, perhaps pricing data for resources your library may not yet have, usage data, which may or may not be available in your ILS system, and any other data that you find that may be appropriate or you're asked to provide from your requesting party. If you are providing a report to someone else for a specific purpose, you should always ask them what kind of information and data they are looking for so that you can be sure to include that. Next, you should consider what tools are you going to use to gather your data? What are you going to use to author your reports? Where are you going to store them? How are you going to share them? Some of these tools, for example, you can build your templates in, which can make pulling data easier. And I'm going to show you some examples of that in Google Sheets and our ILS system, Alma, in a bit. But you can also quickly pull a list of titles from Choice, for example, by building a profile and saving your list there. If you make a user account on their site, or if you use WorldCat, you can create a profile there. You can identify peer institutions, and then those things will all appear in your searches when you're looking for different holdings data for benchmarking purposes, for example. But as for choosing what tools to use and where to store your different templates, creating these templates is to make this work easier for you and those that you will be working with that will have access to them. So you should keep this in mind when you're choosing your tools and choosing where to store your files. You shouldn't try to learn a whole new tool when you're starting out if you don't have to. Something can always be incorporated into your workflow later once you've got all the kinks worked out. For example, if you don't have data visualization skills, that's something that you can incorporate in later or learn later if needed. The most important bits are going to be your data collection methodology, and the narrative that you're going to write using this data and sharing it with others. When choosing my tools, I went with cloud-based technology tools. And this is because this is what I was used to working with in previous positions, but when I was really starting to build these templates for my current position and answering reporting requests, it was during the pandemic, and we were all largely working remotely, or at the very least hybridly. But this fluidity with workspace and computers and the lack of face-to-face communication with my colleagues meant that these documents needed to be able to be shared easily across the web and ideally worked on in tools where real-time collaboration, commenting, and editing was possible. So for my data collection documents, I use Google Sheets for that. I use Google Docs for writing my narratives, and I will further explain some of the benefits of these tools. For data visualization, I use Tableau Public, also for its cloud-based nature, but I also use all of these tools because they are all freely available for my institution to use. All of us are very familiar with the nature of academic library budgets, and know that we may not always have the ability to request the use of expensive technology tools or add things that we may not have. And that's why I've kind of dedicated a lot of my research to sharing information on how to complete library collection development and assessment tasks using freely available cloud-based tools, or in the case of Google Workspace, those that are typically made available for use by academic institutions free of charge to the user. Finally, if you find yourself making a lot of a certain type of end document, make a separate template for it. This will always ultimately save you some time in the long run. Organization is better for all parties involved, and even a very general template can make a task more manageable as it gives you a starting point to work off of. Having a lot of templates available in central locations is also really important, especially to your colleagues. Imagine a scenario where there's an urgent data request that comes in and you're out of office for 2 weeks on vacation. Someone else can step in using your templates to collect that data without needing to wait for your return. And this also applies to having someone, perhaps leave a position and having someone new start with templates so that data can be collected year to year consistently. And it's not such an overwhelming task to learn this part of that person's position when they're also brand new to said position. So next I'm going to go into how I use each of the tools I have chosen to do all of these tasks for my assessment projects. Firstly, I'm going to start with Google Workspace, namely Google Sheets. So I use Google Sheets for data collection because I find spreadsheet software to be the easiest way for me to keep a lot of data well organized, and it can also lend itself easily to data visualization, adding things together if needed, and adding additional years of data year after year if I'm revisiting an old spreadsheet. The type of data I am collecting in Google Sheets does not need to be too complex. So the robustness of Microsoft Excel's capabilities for formulas, for example, is not necessarily needed for my task. I simply need an organized area to input data into. But I also like that using a Google Sheet because I can have one spreadsheet with many different tabs on it so that I can keep different data separately but all together in the same document if it's for one subject area, for example. So as you can see from the included screenshots, I have a layout that I use for collecting monographic data, both print and electronic, from my ILS system, Alma, as well as a template for collecting journal holdings data here. For monographs, I like to include the number of print books, the number of checkouts, the average checkouts per title, and the number of ebooks. Eventually, I would also love to more easily pull in my ebook usage data by subject area as well, but that's still an area I'm working on as an example of how these documents can always be living and improved and more data can be added on later. But for journals, I pull journal ranking data from Schemago. I identify an aligning subject area for the subject that I'm assessing from their database, and I pull the top journals from said subject area and then compare that to our journal holdings, also collecting information on our coverage that's available so that I can include that in the document as well, because our faculty are often interested in knowing that. I also pull current list of outstanding academic titles from Choice to determine the holdings in my collection as well as the collection of one or more identified peer institutions. And this is because it's difficult to kind of compare a collection of one library to another. So this is what we have identified as a way to compare monographic collections in a more manageable way. So that data is also gathered here on that sheet. And then finally, I collect relevant database holdings information and usage data if it's available for said database. But in general, I love working in Google Workspace because it's cloud-based. I can share it with people in real time. I can have multiple people help me fill out a data sheet if needed, and people can leave comments, and it's available no matter what computer I may be working on that day. I would like to show you the reports that I've created in Alma Analytics for pulling that monographic holdings information quickly. If any of you all use Alma, you can use this search criteria to pull holdings data for your own institutions. You may have to mess with a few searching facets dependent upon how your own data may be formatted, but this has been quite successful for us. Previously, we used Millennium for our ILS, and if any of you have ever used Millennium, you have likely fought with its create list function for pulling statistics. Alma Analytics, while it can be very overwhelming, has been such an amazing improvement for pulling our library data more efficiently and effectively. Essentially, for the monographic data, I have created individual reports for each letter of the Library of Congress classification list. This is to not have such a huge report to scroll through of the entire alphabet. Sometimes Alma Analytics can be slow to load those larger reports, so I've separated them in this way just to keep it more manageable. I'm also never going to have to, refer to the entire alphabet at once, usually just pieces of it for these subject reports. But Analytics can provide 4 levels of subclasses for each lettered area in LOC, which you can see in the second screenshot. So this is great for getting more granular data in whatever subject areas you may be pulling data for, especially if topics may be more niche than just pulling education data, for example. Included a screenshot of what my ebook reports look like. And these are very similar to the print reports, but have to be pulled separately because their data is just kept in different areas in Alma Analytics data structure. I have included my criteria here too if folks wish to use it and to look at their own data. But once again, this is an example of where a lot of upfront legwork can be very beneficial to future projects. It took me quite a while to kind of create these reports for each letter and to get my filters right for each type of report to pull the data that I wanted. But now it is super easy to refer to these reports and pull monographic data faster then you can even identify which ones you need to look at in the first place. These reports have also come in handy for others, for other types of tasks. So if you are using Alma Analytics, be sure to put these reports in your shared folder so that all of your colleagues can take advantage of using them as well. And that's kind of another benefit of these cloud-based tools. I wanted to discuss Tableau Public. Tableau can be a very complex tool to learn to use, but it can also be used to create really appealing graphics for even the simplest of data, like the ones we have been discussing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be so complicated. Tableau Public, for example, can easily integrate with Google Sheets as a data source. So I've got my screenshot here of my Google Sheet of monographic holdings for both print and ebooks. And I'm going to show you how we can quickly turn that into visually appealing graphs. So here are graphs that I have included in my informative assessment documents that I've created in Tableau Public using Google Sheets as a data source. I think there's this pressure when it comes to creating data visualizations that they have to be really complicated or they have to be really amazing to be of value. But I think that even showcasing simple data visually can help folks better understand data quickly. Here it's already very easy for us to see which subclasses get the most checkouts, for example, and which subclasses have the most materials available in print or electronic. And you can get that from looking at the raw data, but the visual just helps folks arrive to that conclusion much faster. So now, finally, after collecting all of the data, it's time to start authoring the assessment. I like to use Google Docs for this. And again, this is because it's easy for that real-time collaboration. It's stored remotely on the cloud, and it's easy to refer to no matter where I may be working that day. And folks can leave comments or suggestions in a document as it moves through the approval process. I've shared the assessment template that I've created in Google Docs here that folks are more than welcome to refer to and get some ideas for starting on their own. I thought I would just kind of go through some of the document now so that you can see it. So as you can see here, I have the template open in Google Docs. We've got, our title here. We start with a description of the subject. I've got links out to things where I usually collect that information. We've got a basic structure here of getting our curriculum in there, where to find that information, an audience and what to expect to put into that section in this section here. As we continue down, we have information on faculty, students, our different Library of Congress classification areas will be here. And I like to include a little bit of description about what should go into each area, just in case somebody coming into this just, has no idea where to start. It gives them kind of a base level. If I need to refer back to it, I can always come back to this if I've kind of lost my way. But, as we go through, the whole document has, everything you need. I've got some examples of some of my data visualizations, if those want to be included, and what they've looked like in the past. I've got that here. And just go through the different types of holdings that you want to highlight in your informative document and different examples of the data visualizations I've included for each type. And then, of course, the document concludes with a recommendation section, and that's where you're just going to kind of synthesize all of the information that you've laid out in the rest of the document and kind of, made your recommendations for new resources or your recommendations for how well our collections are performing and that sort of thing. That can be done here. Now I thought I would take you through a completed collection assessment document. This one I completed for Studio Art and follows the template that I just showed you. We'll go to our collection assessment area on our LibGuide. We'll be able to see those here. I'll pop over to Studio Art. So, we have our description here filled out, our curriculums filled out for our undergraduate program, as well as our minor. We've got our audiences identified, faculty members have been identified with their specialties. We have our students. We have our Library of Congress classifications filled out here, and that can be pretty long. Got our different selection criteria filled out, our current holdings for studio art, which may look familiar from before, our ebook data as well here. We've got our serials information here with our full text download data. That's where I like to include the usage data in here of our full text downloads. Similarly, for the databases, I like to include that search data if it is available. It's not always available for every database, as we know, but I like to include it in there. Our state of the collection with our peer institution comparisons of academic titles in art and architecture for studio art. And then, my recommendations based on, what different LOC classifications maybe we should collect more in if they're, they get a lot of checkouts or if they don't have a big collection. Analyzing our journal holdings, maybe we need XYZ journal, different places that we can get that information from. If I have any database recommendations based on looking at rankings or peer institutions, I can put that here. And yeah, that's basically it for the document. Once they all start coming together, they start looking, uniform as you go across different subject areas. Like African American Studies has been done by me, so it looks similar. But if you go to an older one, you'll notice that the formatting's all different among all the ones that are older. So our physics one it hasn't been done since 2006. But I'm slowly working through all of these and trying to get them, all on the same page. I have found that implementing these templates and using them for these different work scenarios has been very beneficial. It has made data collection and preparation of these different types of documents way less stressful and time-consuming for me, which was my number one concern. But when the data and documents are shared with members of the campus community, they are really helpful, and they are often surprised at the level of detail provided and learn much more about the library collections available to them. And this is great for all of us as we can get a bit of collection promotion directly to our faculty members. And we are also directly supporting different initiatives across campus, such as the growth of new programs, while also retaining the reality of perhaps needing new resources and support of new programs in order to actually get these new programs going through scholarship and research. But it has in the past been kind of challenging to have the library be part of these conversations across campus. But with the implementation of these processes and being more involved in that proposal process, we are now directly tied into that process to provide our feedback and support, which has been a really refreshing change. So in some ways, when I was putting together this presentation, it kind of seemed that it would be an obvious practice to document things, to make templates, but it's not something that's always discussed. And I think people are surprised at how often data collection processes are not standardized and they're not organized. And I just really want to take the time to reiterate that while it can be time-consuming to complete, it is really important and helpful to all at your institution to at the very least document how certain data are being collected, especially data that may be requested on a yearly basis. And this can be especially useful during your ILS migrations if you're going through those as well, because you'll often need to adjust your practices or account for discrepancies in data because of changes in formatting. I also think that the templates could be a great practice for those libraries that do not have a person necessarily dedicated to assessment, or find it daunting to collect data for different requests when they have, 500 other things going on. But building yourself those templates in Google Sheets, for example, even if they're very simple, that's a freely available tool that can really help you get started even in a time of stress. It gives you a place to start. It gives you a good foundation. And I found that, those across campus will really be appreciative of your efforts if you put in that work on making your assessment documents really great. That is all that I have for you all today. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions whatsoever. I really appreciate you all taking your time today. Thank you so much.